Greetings, Internet. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet. Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. Greetings, Internet.
9 o'clock.
Can you hear me? If you can hear me, write a message in the live chat that says that, yes, you can hear me and I haven't completely screwed this. All right, let's see if this is any better. Yeah, we're good. Someone let me know. No audio. No audio now. Well, this is fun. Hold on a sec. You're good. Okay. We're good. All right, let's try this again. Welcome everyone to my first ever live stream broadcast. Yeah, so I'm just gonna start from the beginning because obviously we had some issues, and first of all, I'm getting over a cold, so if I'm a little bit gross here and take a moment to sip my hot toddy here, then please forgive me. So the first thing I want to do is make a couple thank yous. The most important one, first of all, is my collaborator on this piece. I could not have done this without him. As some of the critics have suggested already, I'm not an expert in environmental permitting, specifically air quality permitting. This is something that I have had to self-educate about in the last few weeks, and I could not have done it without this guy. I mean, he saw the story. This is really more his story than mine. It took both of us collaborating. It was a great collaborative effort, but I could not have done this without him. Like, this is too complicated of a subject, and I just really appreciate it. You know who you are. I wish I could identify you because you deserve a ton of credit for this. This is really amazing work, but not being able to identify you, thank you. You know who you are. I've thanked you before, but I wanted to do it publicly because this is just amazing. The other thing I wanted to say, thank you to everyone who read this story. Like, I realize that we live in an age where attention spans are limited, and this is not a story that is easy to read, easy to understand. So everyone who that's why I'm doing this Q&A. I wanted to, take an opportunity to help people understand it. Like I said, this subject area, this story took me a long time to understand, and I understand that some people don't want to believe what's in the story, don't want to accept that it's true, and so they, trying to poke holes in it. That's fine. I welcome that. I welcome criticism, but just understand that, like, this is not a 5-minute expert kind of a story. Like, it takes time to understand what's really going on here, how these permits work, how these, emissions factors are calculated. There's just a lot of complexity here. So if you did take the time to read this, and especially if you're here watching it and you want to talk about it more, you want to understand it better, thank you, because that takes a lot of effort, and I really appreciate it. Like I said, it's easy to just kind of follow the fun, sexy, easy to understand stories, and this is definitely not any one of those things. So thank you. The one other thing I wanted to actually thank before we sort of dig into the substance of this is actually, I want to thank Tesla, Tesla's PR team, for allowing me to reopen a dialogue with them. I think a lot of you are familiar with earlier this summer, I wrote a story that I did not speak to Tesla PR about before publishing, and that led to a contretemps that was, I think, something that both of us kind of regret. I certainly regret not giving them the opportunity to comment on that story before I published it, and I think they, maybe I'm guessing I don't speak for Tesla, but I think we both kind of regret it. So after that story, I reopened a dialogue with them, and they didn't have to do that. They did not have to engage with me. But they did, and I think it's in their interest to. I don't think that they're doing it, out of charity to me, because, the reality is that I can write a story, and that's going to be based on my research, and it's going to reflect my, perspective on the situation. And for them, having an opportunity to provide some feedback is their opportunity to tell their part of the story. Now, they did that in this case, and I think that's something that maybe some people don't understand about this specific story, is that, we did this research, did our analysis, came to some conclusions, and then, I sent the research to Tesla with a bunch of questions, and said, listen, I want to get the facts right. Like, the most important thing about this story is incredibly complicated. I fully admit there are lots of places in which I could have, misinterpreted something, miscalculated something. There's almost infinite opportunities to screw a story like this up because it is so complicated. And I sent it to them, and normally, as being in the position that I'm in, you don't like to sort of give the company that you're covering the opportunity to control the pace of publication, right? That's something that as a media, outlet, you want to run the story, on your schedule. And in this case, it's important, I think, for everyone to understand that, they had 2 weeks, which is way more time than I typically give, for comment. And it's because I understand this is a complicated story. I know that a PR person who has to cover every possible kind of story about their company, they're not going to know this, permitting, stuff off the top of their head. So I gave them as much time as they needed, and it ended up being over 2 weeks before they got back to me. And their comment on the story was extremely limited. I mentioned it several times in the story, but just to clarify, their comment was the paint shop expansion project is happening in phases. That was. Hang on just a sec. I have a phone call. Hello? Sorry about that. So I gave them 2 weeks to respond to this, and like I said, their response was this project's happening in phases, and that was a little bit. I mean, on the one hand, it was a validation, right? Because listen, people have suggested, for example, based on their understanding of VOC limits in California regulation, that the 4.8 pounds per gallon of applied solids, that's too high. It can't be right. Well, that's in the permit. That's in the permit that Tesla applied for and got. That's the limit. That's what they're going to comply with. And if they have a special low VOC paint, capability, which is something I'll talk about in a minute here, if they said, well, in reality, that's the limit, but, our actual paints that we're using are 50% of the VOC content, that the limit applies, or the limit allows, and therefore we can do, twice as many cars as your analysis shows, that would have been, the story. I mean, they could have easily proved that, no, it's not 250,000 cars. We can do 500,000 cars with this permit because our actual VOC content is this. And I think part of the problem with this is that, again and again, we see, Tesla, they inspire magical thinking. Like, there's really not another way to put it. And they're very good at it. There's a blog post by Jerome Guillen talking about our low VOC, special paint process, and it's so wonderful. It is wonderful. I mean, it's a good they use, but they use system, products and systems that are available off the shelf to every automaker. They use, Eisenman, paint shop with Dur robots. They use a BASF E-coat and clear coat with PPG pigments. I mean, these are things, that any automaker can use, and lots of automakers do use. There's nothing special. And again, I'm not saying this to hate on Tesla. I'm saying this because there's so clearly misperceptions about what it is they do and what they're capable of. They're using off-the-shelf OEM stuff. Now they're using higher-end stuff, okay, but it's still no different, their E-coat, there's a press release where, Chery, the Chinese car maker, uses the exact same BASF E-coat. So I think one of the things that's really important to understand with this story is that, there's nothing magical going on here. What Tesla is doing is really not all that different than what other automakers do. So the first question is how can you be sure they paid any attention? Do you have dialogue with empowered people? I go through Tesla's PR department. It's the standard way to do this. As someone in my position, I have a specific contact there that I deal with on an ongoing basis. And like I said, this person does not, nor should they be expected to have specific knowledge about this highly technical topic, and that's fine. So it's not a question of, I sent the story or the research to my one contact and, said, you have to give me this answer in 24 hours. No, I recognize up front, this person is going to have to talk to other people in the company to understand. They took 2 weeks. They had 2 weeks to get this research to anyone in their company who might understand the situation and be able to present information that would, either validate or invalidate the conclusions that we draw in the story. And again, the only comment that we got back was this paint shop expansion is happening in phases. So I can't tell you exactly who at the company saw our research. All I can tell you is that they had 2 weeks. In theory, that's plenty of time to get it to anybody at the company who could have provided some comment on it. And again, that's much longer than I give, the subject of these stories, time to respond typically. And again, it's because I know this is a complicated subject. A PR person isn't going to be able to get a statement out, overnight or even, in a couple hours. So give them lots and lots of time. The fact that they didn't get back right, it doesn't prove anything. And people have said sort of, they don't owe you a response. Like, no, they don't owe me a response. But we have reopened a dialogue, and we've done it because both sides agree, I agree, and they agree that it's important to get the facts right. And it's in their interest as well as my interest. We share, that interest in getting the story right. And, they had 2 weeks to provide input on it. And what you see is what it's not, I didn't send them the story as it's written now, but I sent them all the relevant information. And I sent them links after it went up and said, I'm always, and that's the thing, people are like, oh, you just want to, do hit jobs on Tesla, blah, blah, blah. Like, I want to write stories that are accurate. I really do. And if there's anything factually inaccurate, from the very first day I got into this business of writing about the car business, I've always insisted that like any factual inaccuracy that I write is a failure on my part, and that I want to hear about it and I want to fix it. And I'm happy to listen to criticism. I don't shy away from it, especially from the only source of 100% accurate information for a story like this, which is the car company. And I think that's something that's really important to understand, because that's the context for stories like this, is that we're not covering the weather. It's not like anybody can go outside and look up at the sky and say, this is what this company is doing, right? Like, companies control the information. And what really inspired this story, besides my collaborators' instinct that there was something going on here, was the fact that there was just so much contradictory reporting about this paint shop. People, have been saying different things about it for a long time. The company, and there will be a follow-up story on this, I promise. I can't promise when it will be, but I do think it's really important to go back and look at what the company said, and then look at what financial analysts and reporters have said about this, and match it up with sort of, when the permit was applied for, when the authority to construct was received. Because I think what it shows is that there's been a lot of communication about sort of, we're working on this paint shop before they'd even applied for the permit, let alone received it. And a lot of Wall Street analysts had, took very carefully worded statements by the company and interpreted them in ways that were just wrong, that just misrepresented the situation on the ground. And this paint shop was really, this is something that happens a lot with Tesla, and this is one of the reasons I think it's really important that people like myself dig into this stuff and really find out what's actually going on. And in this case in particular, it was one of the real motivations for this story was the fact that you can go and research this and find like 10 different, sort of reports about sort of where this was at different times. So anyway, so that's something I'm working on. Hopefully be able to get that up soon so you see it, and I think that will help explain why I wrote this story. So I'm going to go and answer some questions right here. Did you talk to paint experts? Yes, I did. I talked to several auto industry paint experts. I didn't include their quotes or testimony directly in the piece, but they certainly informed it. Actually, I really should thank them as well. Again, you know who you are. These are people, and one of the things that's important to point out here is that if you cover Tesla for a while, you see the discourse around Tesla for a while, you notice a pattern in the people who defend the company. Not really, the company itself as well, as we saw earlier in the summer with my NDA story, but the people who followed as well, there's a real tendency to rely on ad hominem attacks. someone will report something that doesn't look good for the company, and the response is not to engage in the substance of the facts. The response 9 times out of 10 is to engage in ad hominem attack. You are shorting the stock. You are, a shill for big oil. You're a shill for big oil. Whatever it is. And I'm sorry, but like that's why people who collaborate with me, this is why I can't name them. Because these are professionals, right? You have to be a professional to really understand, how these paint shops work in depth, how environmental permitting works in depth. And the reality is that Tesla and its fans and investors in particular have really created an environment in which people don't feel comfortable putting their name on the analysis that they give because, again, the response is just to smear them. And I've witnessed that firsthand. I've been accused of fabricating stories and doing it in order to manipulate the stock by Tesla itself. And I want to put that in the past. This is not something that that bothers me particularly anymore. It did when it first happened, but I'm over it basically at this point. But So the answer to the question though is yes, I did talk to paint experts. Again, I couldn't really have done this story entirely without them. And the other thing I should point out is that this story is, this is just the first piece. We're going to continue to follow up on this story. There's lots of angles. I already mentioned sort of the media angle to this that I think is really important to look at. How the media and Wall Street analysts have been representing these facts and sort of showing this connection between Tesla's, kind of consistent pattern of saying things that are factually not inaccurate, but that can be interpreted in a way that are. And then fans, investors, and sell-side analysts interpreting it in that misrepresentative, false way. So that's the first piece, but there's going to be others. We're going to continue to look at this. The great thing about this is that, Tesla is permitted for this 220,000 units, give or take. And I believe them when they say that this is a phased expansion and that they want to get to 500,000 units, but they haven't applied for a permit to get there. And when they do, I will find out about it and I will report on it. And I'm very looking forward to seeing that permit and seeing how long it takes for the Air Quality Management District to respond and issue an authority to construct. I'm very curious about the details about it because that will really show when that happens that, yes, in fact, they are currently only permitted for 220,000 units. They have to do another phase. They have to apply for that permit. And when that happens, we'll have a much better sense of how this issue affects the timeline. I tried to make it clear in the piece that this raises real questions about their ability to hit some of their goals. I think it also, the 200, 300, 400% growth, I think this story, as is right now, it proves they could, in theory, hit 200, but 300 and 400% growth over this year's 80 to 90,000 units, it just cannot happen because of this temporary limit, which is totally indisputable. So that's one of the only things we can definitively prove that this story, prevents them from accomplishing. And like I said, I think I tried to explain in the story how this raises questions and gives them a very, very narrow path to hit the goals that they've talked about. But we don't know what the timeline will really be until they apply for this permit. We can estimate based on what's happened in the past, but we don't know. So we're going to continue to stay in touch with the Public Records Office at BAAQMD. We're going to find permits, applications as they get filed, permits and ATCs as they get issued, and we're going to continue to keep you informed because clearly this is an important story, and clearly, when communications happen a certain way, as Ronald Reagan said, you got to trust but verify, and this is the way we have of verifying it. So we're going to continue to do that because it's an important story. All right. Comment. Elon Musk seems to have a build it and they will come mentality that helps him achieve its goals. Is this different? Can he overcome this hurdle? Well, that's why I think this story is important. That's why we looked at this. People have been saying, people who are manufacturing experts in the car industry have been telling me and others, my colleagues, that Tesla's goals are impossible. and or very close to being impossible. And I take those kinds of that kind of feedback very seriously. These people clearly know what they're doing. This is what they do for a living, and they have a lot of experience. They work for companies that have been doing this for a century in some cases. So I but the problem is, right, and it's also important to understand that this piece doesn't talk at all about the sort of manufacturing and logistical challenges of this ramp. And in part, the reason that I think this story is important, the reason I invested the time into this story is that those issues, right, like, logistical issues, getting suppliers in line, manufacturing processes, getting the space at the plant, all those sorts of things are things that it's very hard to get visibility on. And, look, I believe, I fully, agree and admit that Elon Musk is an incredibly impressive guy and that he inspires people to do really amazing things. And I'm a big fan of a lot of the stuff that he does and that he's able to get people to achieve. I think it's really impressive. And so a lot of the sort of skepticism that I hear coming from the auto industry and the experts in these fields, I do take it with a grain of salt. Again, these are professionals, they're experts, they're smart, capable people who really know the ins and outs of this business, but they do things a certain way, and Tesla clearly does things a different way. I think what's important about this story is that environmental permitting is not something that you can sort of growth hack. I think that's really the most important thing about this story. That's why I invested the time into this story. This is a limit that doesn't matter how smart or inventive you are, how much you can inspire people, or even how much capital you can get access to. These environmental regulation is just one of those. It's implacable. It short of basically doing illegal things, you can't just make this stuff go away. You can't get around it easily. That's why this is important. No amount of faith in Elon Musk changes the regulatory realities around this factory and the ramp plans. Regulations are what they are. So that's why I think this is important. Question. The biggest implication is that they are knowingly misleading with their 500,000 projections. Seems few actually believe them. Yeah, I don't want to say that they're misleading. I think that they believe they want to get to 500,000 units. I believe that. They are planning a phased expansion that they think will get them to that goal. I don't dispute that. What this story questions is, how soon can they do that? And again, they can inspire people's faith to believe that, they can do this really, really fast. They can do this faster than any other car company has. They can do this better than any other car company. People can believe what they want, and they're welcome to. But regulatory realities are not affected by people's faith. There is no. I mean, maybe I'm wrong about them. Maybe I would love to hear how someone might be able to get around these kinds of regulatory limits. I think I would be very interested in it. I think environmental groups who are committed to protecting the regional environment. And by the way, I mean, this is one of the issues here is that environmental groups have been very concerned about this factory. This factory is one of the biggest sources of pollution in the San Francisco Bay Area. And there's a lot of environmental groups who, throughout the history of this plant, have been very concerned because unlike every plant basically that's been built since the Clean Air Act has passed, this is in a majorly populated area. Now, this was something that used to happen in the earlier in the auto industry's history, right? There used to be a car factory in Long Beach, California. There used to be this car factory was built, in Fremont, right? Close to heavily populated areas of the Bay Area. You'll notice that doesn't happen anymore, and this is why. And frankly, I think that this story also helps explain why Toyota was willing to give this plant away, so not give it away, but sell it for so cheap. I think that the interesting counterfactual there is that at the time of the downturn, when GM went bankrupt and this plant basically it went from being a GM Toyota joint venture to being something that was just Toyota's. Old GM or GM in the bankruptcy dumped it into old GM. It became Toyota's problem, really. Like they had to figure out what to do with it. And they had just built, right around the same time, they just completed, just before the downturn, a new plant in Mississippi. And I think it's very instructive that they decided to keep, I mean, first of all, it's a newer plant, right? The one in Mississippi is a newer plant, and there are obviously advantages to doing that. But rural Mississippi has very different regulatory environment when it comes to air quality and other environmental issues than California, specifically right in the Bay Area. And this plant, the Fremont plant that is now the Tesla plant, it's in what's called a non-attainment zone. I try and explain this in the piece. It's a little bit complicated, but you can go on the EPA website and find out more about what non-attainment zones mean. But as we explained in the piece, relatively small increases in net emissions at a plant in a non-attainment zone very quickly bump you into a very, very stringent level of regulation. And you have more flexibility at a plant that is not in a non-attainment zone, that's in a more rural area where people aren't affected. Because the issue with paint shops in particular, it's not even a greenhouse gas emissions issue as much. I mean, there are those as well, and there's a little bit of a trade-off between VOC emissions and greenhouse gas emissions that's too complicated to get into for this story. But the real issue with these VOCs is that they're a local pollutant. It's a little bit like the NOx issue with Volkswagen diesels. This was not a question of emitting too many greenhouse gases. It was emitting too many local pollutants. And the issue with that is that that's a local issue, right? This is not a big picture global warming issue. This is people living in the area are rightly concerned about the amount of these kinds of pollutants that are coming out of plants like this. And excuse me, I was just at Fremont actually a couple times in the last month or so, and they're building a residential development right next to the plant. There's a new BART station that's going in right by the plant. They're building a new residential development, literally butting up against the north end of the plant. And to me, I think people who are moving into that development and people who already live in the Fremont area and all around it, I think they deserve to understand what the real emissions increase and what the situation around this plant's expansion is. And that's really the issue, I think, here. That's why this story matters, is that Tesla is saying we can do 800,000 or 1 million units at this plant. That maybe it's not advisable, but it is feasible. And I think it's really important that Tesla is as upfront as they possibly can. If they have that goal, I think it's really incumbent on them to communicate clearly and effectively to the people who live in this area. What does an increase from 90,000 units a year, which is what they're at right now, to 10 times that level? What does that look like? What is the real emissions impact of that? And I think it's really dangerous to just assume that they have a mission for sustainable transportation, and that means they won't pollute. No, I mean, you can't build cars, and specifically, you can't paint cars without polluting. I mean, you just cannot do it. And so I think it's incumbent on Tesla to explain to the community that they're a part of. Really, this is not about. It's certainly not about me. I mean, I think there's other regulatory interests in this and environmental concerns, but I think really, to me, this is about the people who live in this area, because these are local pollutants. They do cause cancers and things like that, respiratory problems, and that's serious. And again, this plant has never made more than 450,000 units before. Going up to 800,000 to 1 million could be, I don't see, and neither do the people I've talked to for this piece, they don't understand how that could happen without significantly increasing the amount of pollution that's coming out of this plant. So again, I think people have the right to know that, and I think Tesla really should be proactive about this. I think that they should be talking about what this very, very ambitious goal will mean for the people who live around that plant. And I mean, just to take it even to a not even environmental level, I mean, this is already, they're doing 90,000 units, and there's nowhere to park anywhere near the plant. I mean, there are overflow lots and things like that, but you're already seeing that this plant is, you look at it, you look at what's going on with it right now, and you try and imagine a 10 times increase in the volume of production there, and it's not a pretty sight. And I think these permits show that, and I think that you just going and looking at the plant show that. And so This is something that people need to pay attention to because, this is cancer, and this is, there are real health concerns around this kind of stuff. So what is the finding? There's a kind of a general question. What is the finding of the story? How do I summarize the story? The basic summary is pretty simple. It's that Tesla has only applied for one permit to expand their paint shop, and that permit, the authority to construct that they've received based on their permit application, limits them to 220 or so thousand units, about half. As I said, they say that there's going to be another phase of expansion, and I don't think they're lying about that. But the process that they're going to have to go through to reach that is very challenging. I think the other part of that's really important to understand of this story is that, right, this is a facility. The entire facility has a permit limit of about 1,000 tons of VOC emissions a year, which again makes it one of the biggest polluters in the Bay Area. 600, and these are rough numbers, so don't take them seriously, but these are just trying to give a rough sense of what's going on. 600 tons of that annual limit come from the paint shop as it's currently permitted at 220, give or take, 1,000 units. So, these things, this is not a linear thing, so it's not like doubling this paint shop will definitely create 1,200, pounds of VOC emissions a year. They can scale that up, and I fully admit, they may well be able to hit 500,000 units without creating a net increase in VOC emissions of 40 tons a year. And that's the key here, is that when they create new emission sources, they can remove older emission sources, and as long as the net increase is under 40 tons a year, they can continue to use what's called best available control techniques, which is the standard regulatory framework for air quality, air emissions, regulation, especially, and it's specific to the Bay Area. If they go over a 40 ton a year net increase, then they get bumped into a much more challenging level of regulation called LAER. We try and explain that in the piece a bit, and that's also something you can go to the EPA website and research. And I think one of the important findings of this piece as well, this research, is that this hasn't been done for an automotive paint shop in the US. And it's because since the Clean Air Act, people don't build plants in urban areas, in non-attainment zones. And it's because the amount of money that is going to have to be spent in order to achieve an LAER regulatory standard it's going to be a lot. I can't estimate how much it's going to cost. I can't even really tell you exactly what the difference between a BACT compliance and LAER compliance would be in terms of percentages, but it's a lot more. It's going to be a lot more, and that's something that I hope to explain in follow-ups to this piece. But if you look at, right, if 600 tons a year just for the paint shop at 220,000 units a year, you increase that by 17%, and you're over that 40 ton a year. By 7%. So by 15,000 units, you're over that threshold into LAER, and that's really tough. And so again, my understanding is that it's possible for them to get to 500,000 units and stay under the LAER threshold. It's possible. They have some wiggle room. I can't quantify it precisely. It seems like they have a fairly narrow path to that. My understanding, though, is that beyond 500,000 units a year, the ability to zero out other emission sources in order to stay under that 40 ton a year limit is basically it's not plausible. So I believe that they can do a second phase to 500,000 units and in theory possibly stay under that limit, but it will be difficult and it will take time, and they haven't even applied for that permit yet. Beyond that, I think that this shows that it's very, basically impossible to do 800,000 million units a year. What will happen in 2018? Tesla massively underdelivers. What good comes from the magical projections if they spout it from when the time comes? So basically, like, I think the question here is Tesla sort of setting too high of expectations? Yeah, I mean, I think that's my opinion. I think it could be challenging for them. I mean, obviously, I think this story shows how hard it will be for them to do the timeline that they say they're going to do. And that matters because, look, people have $1,000 tied up with this company, not escrowed, and they're expecting to receive their cars by a certain time. And I think that what these permit limits show is that not everyone is going to get their vehicle, I think, when they think they will, or when they hope they will. And again, I think it is in Tesla's interest to be more realistic about how it, A, the goals it sets, B, how it communicates those goals, because I think, you create a real risk for yourself as a company if you overpromise and underdeliver. And this is something that Tesla, is not a new problem for Tesla. This is something that people have been, talking about and pointing out for years now. And my hope is that they realize that. On the other hand, it's part of their appeal. Part of their appeal as a company, as a brand, and Musk as a person is that they try and do things that other people say are very hard or impossible. So I appreciate the appeal there. I just, it's one thing to say you're going to land a rocket on a barge, or you're going to even, just physically being able to go from 50,000 to 500,000 units a year in a couple of years. Even that has challenges that, again, this piece doesn't look at all, but I think that are very real, and I hope to see more coverage of in the future. But these limits they're just hard and fast things. There's no way around them, and so I think that in light of them, people should be very careful about assuming when they're going to get their Tesla Model 3, and not necessarily take sort of the best case scenario based on the things that Tesla has implied. Because again, you have this dog whistle thing. People are saying, oh well, the BAAQMD board meeting says Tesla is permitted to hit 520,000 units by 2018. And it doesn't say 520,000 units a year, and it doesn't say that for a very good reason. And the response has been, well, but they, that's not how permits work. Well, BAQMD, when they made that schedule that you're reading off of, this is not something that they went through and calculated. They're pulling from Tesla's permit application. They're just using Tesla's language. That's what Tesla said. And again, you see, that they say things like, we'll be able to build 520,000 units by 2018, and people, I'm not going to name names now, but people go and say, oh no, this means, that they're going to be able to build 520,000 a year by 2018. I think that this shows that there's no way that they're going to actually build 500,000 units in 2018. I think it's actually very questionable whether they will be able to actually build 500,000 units in 2019. It's possible, theoretically, but everything has to go perfect, and they have to get their permit in, within, I don't know, at least within the next month or two, at least by the end of the year, to even have a shot of hitting that run rate by 500,000 by 2018 or even 2019. So again, I think expectations matter here. Another question. Okay, just a sec. To survive, they must be extremely aspirational so they can eventually get the $10 billion it takes to build cars at $1 million a year. Is an industry standard number? Okay, I'm sorry, that's not a question. An alarming amount of executives left the customer this year alone, 11 last time I counted. Do you have any word on what this is going on internally? No, I don't know exactly why each of, I think people are individuals, people make decisions for lots of different reasons. I don't think there's any one reason that people join or leave a company. Everyone's different. But I think there is clearly there's always been turnover with this company. This is not a new thing. This has been happening for a long time. People who have been part of the company and around the community around this company for a while tell me that, every time a car comes out, there's big amounts of turnover. And I think, the top executives, oftentimes they have to do SEC filings about their departures or press releases about new hires, departures, that kind of thing. But I think under the surface of that, there's a lot of turnover. And I have opinions about it. I've been educating myself a lot about the culture inside this company, and I think that there are things there that explain some of that stuff. But that's for a different story for a different day. I want to try and keep on this as much as as much as possible. How is the book coming? No comment. On a sec. How long would it take to apply, receive approval for the next phase of growth to meet 500,000 cars? Well, that's the question, right? And the answer is we don't know. I think one of the things that's really important to just the only way to answer this question is to just look at what's been done so far. And what you have is a permit was applied for in December 2014. This was when Tesla said, here's the expansion we want to do, here's our calculations about what this project means in regulatory terms and in terms of air quality emissions. Please give us a permit to do this. So that was December 2014. And then 7 months later, July 9th, 2015, they received their authority to construct. So 6-7 months for a permit. I mean, I think that's generally, I think 6 months is the rule of thumb for, something that is not especially complicated, that, can be done, that doesn't require any kind of really special regulatory issues. So they were able to, for that permit, they were able to net out old emission sources in order to make up for the new emission sources. And so they didn't have a net increase for that permit to get to 220,000 units. Which is not a huge surprise, and that's why they had a smooth, relatively short process to get from that application in December to the authority to construct in July. Now, construction is one of the big questions, right? How long does it take to construct one of these things once you have the permit? Tesla, in a number of their communications, said prior to even receiving the authority to construct, they said several times that they had started work on this paint shop. And in fact, the story that the San Jose Mercury wrote about, Slovenian contractors, that whole situation, if you're familiar with Tesla, you're familiar with it. That particular worker that was the center of that story was injured before Tesla received the authority to construct. So there was, and he was working on the paint shop. But it's important to understand that this permit only covers the equipment that is actually covered by the permit, right? So it's actually just the paint equipment itself. So you can do all kinds of wiring work, ventilation. You can do a lot of work on the facility that will house the paint line without getting the authority to construct. But you need to have the actual paint shop itself, the physical components that do the painting and then create the pollution. You're not allowed to install until you receive your authority to construct. So they received the authority to construct in July 9th, 2015. And then a year later, so then, again, there have been conflicting reports, maybe some of this is online. Oh, some of it is it's all 500,000 units is definitely online. We've gotten a lot of conflicting reporting from, bloggers, whatever, media and Wall Street, analysts. And I think it's one of the most, clear indications of sort of where this project really is that in July 31st, the city of Fremont, their development department has a document that they update regularly that shows the development that's going on in their community and where it's at, where in the process it is. And as of July 31st of this year, so more than a year after they received the authority to construct, that document states that the Tesla North Paint Shop expansion project is open for public comment. And they have codes in that document. It is linked in the story, so feel free to go and take a look. Don't take my word for it. There are different codes that are associated with each project that's going on in Fremont that reflect the status of it. One of them is open for public comment, and the other is, another is under construction. Clearly open for public comment is something that would happen before construction. So as of July 31st, it seems fairly safe to assume that construction was not yet started. At least on the part that was permitted. Now that could be wrong. The city could have their facts wrong, but again, I brought this to Tesla. They had the opportunity to say, no, they're confused, they're wrong about that. We've been under construction, we got the authority a year ago, we've been building ever since. And again, they don't owe it to me, but they owe it to themselves to get the facts out there right? I mean, I don't understand why they would want me to publish something that was factually incorrect. So again, I've been to the factory twice in the last couple months, and there's clearly some construction going on. I was not able to see. I'm not going to speak with the confidence of Trip Chowdhury, who just recently was there and said, oh yeah, there's definitely construction and stuff like, it's hard to tell from outside the plant what exactly is going on there. I believe that some of the work that is necessary to get this paint shop installed has clearly been done. Whether the shop itself, the actual paint equipment has been installed, is not clear. And as of July 31st, it seems like it wasn't. And one other point that's really important to understand: there are three. So Tesla applied for a permit in December 2014. They got the authority to construct in July of 2015. There's a third part of that, and if you look at the ATC that we have linked in the story, there's a part of that that's like a tear-off piece of this authority that is the startup notification. And when Tesla actually starts to use the equipment that they've installed under this permit, they have to notify the Air Quality Management District, and they have to do that because the regulations call for a period of testing, and the regulators need to know about it. So as of the publication date of this story, I had confirmed with BAE QMD that Tesla has not filed the startup notification for that. So if it's all installed, if it's there, it's not being used. It can't be used until they file this startup notification. So again, I'm going to continue to follow up on this. I'm going to continue to stay in touch with the Air Quality Management District, and as soon as they file a startup notification, I will certainly report on it, because that will give us a much more granular sense of specific sense of what the timeline will be for them to get this stuff installed. So right now, it's looking like it's going to be closer to a 2-year process from permit application until startup notification than anything else. They could start up, tomorrow, or they could start up next week, and then we would know for sure. So at this point, now we're waiting for A, that startup notification, and then B, Tesla needs to file their permits, or their application for a permit for the second phase. When they do that, then sort of the countdown will begin, right? We'll know that they applied. We'll know how long it took them last time. We'll be able to look at that application permit and make some analysis of what it says. So stay tuned. We'll continue to follow this, and we'll give you a more specific answer about how long this is really going to take Tesla. Because right now we don't know for sure. All we know is that there are obstacles to hitting the timelines that they've talked about. A lot of questions coming in, so I'm going to try and get a little more faster. Okay. Given the constraints on the plant, do you see them moving or acquiring a plant elsewhere? This is a good question. Elon Musk has talked about building new plants. He's been very specific that in the future, right now they have the Gigafactory building batteries, and they have Fremont building cars, and in the future they want to be able to do both in one place. They want to have sort of cell to car, all under one roof, which cool, right? So yeah, I mean, they certainly could. I think it's important to note that Musk said specifically that they can do 800,000 to 1 million at Fremont, and I think he was very right to say that he was right to say that it may not be advisable, right? He said it's feasible, but maybe not advisable. I think the second half of that is absolutely correct. I think it's very unadvisable to try and expand a plant in this non-attainment zone urban area with developments going right next to it and people living around it. I don't think it's advisable to push that plant to 800,000 to 1 million units a year. Maybe they can do it. It's theoretically possible, but I think the onus is on them to prove that they can. So I mean, there's always other options. I think there's been talk about a plant in China. I think Michael Dunn at Forbes just had a really good. No one knows China's car business better than him, and at least no one working in the media that I'm aware of. I recommend you read that. Tesla has major problems in China. I think it's going to be a long time before, if ever, before they really get a plant there. So, and then people talk about the Tilburg plant in Europe. Well, that's basically a knockdown kit plant. It does not have full assembly, doesn't have stamping. I don't think it has a paint shop, although I'm still trying to confirm that. So the manufacturing footprint that they have is mostly in California, around this non-attainment zone. So expanding Lathrop or some of these other facilities that they have, some of the the former Solyndra building, these other things that are around the Fremont plant. I mean, they're all subject to the same issues, and unlike the Fremont plant, they don't have existing sources of pollution that they could reduce or mitigate in order to net out the increase that would be caused by putting a new paint shop in or whatever. One of the scenarios people have asked about as well is could they put in a paint shop at the Gigafactory? I certainly think that the environmental regulatory environment in that area is going to be relatively easier to do something like that in. However, the logistics of having an off-site paint shop, I think there's a reason that that's not done in the car business. I think if you just think about, stamping, body shop, that kind of stuff has to be done. Then you put it on rail cars and you ship it off to Fremont. I ship it off to the Gigafactory. In theory, maybe you could put batteries and the paint on at the same time, maybe, and then ship it back. The logistics of that are really challenging, and again, I don't want to sit here and say, Elon Musk, his company can't do X, Y, or Z. Like, I'm impressed by his ability to do very challenging things that people are skeptical about, and that's something I'm very well aware of. But I think if you just think through and one of the issues too around this is that Tesla's paint quality right now is not great, and I think that if you think about the process of painting bodies and then shipping them hundreds of miles, and then doing final assembly, I think the risk of damage to the paint, is huge. And, they're already at a high defect rate, which again also plays into this, right? Because if 10% of the cars you make are defective, those 10% add to your emissions, right? Just because they're defective doesn't mean they don't add to your emissions. You just can't sell them. So that's a factor here as well. And so if something like this, it just, the damage to the paint would be really hard to mitigate. Again, maybe they can do it, but nobody else in the car business does it, and I think for very good reasons. And they can open another plant. We haven't heard. They don't have any announcements about that. So we'll see. Maybe they'll open another plant. The industry standard is usually about 5 years. Is pretty much the minimum for opening a new plant. I'm not aware of any that are sitting open, ready to go. I'd be curious to hear Tesla's plans if they involve that. But right now, all they're saying is we're going to expand the paint shop at Fremont. Let's see. People waited 4 years for Model X. Why not wait 2 years for Model 3 production? How many of the Model 3 reservations are real? Okay, well, the reservation question is a good one. We don't know. They haven't given us an updated number on that for months, and I think that's also something that they should do. I think if they're going to go back to the market for to raise money, I think they will do that, and I'm very curious to see what the latest number on that is. I don't think that people who waited 4 years for Model X were happy with that. I think I think Tesla, because of the company they are, and I think they were cut slack to do that, and good for them, because a lot of other companies would not have been able to get away with that. We'll see. And again, I think it's just really important, as I said earlier, to manage expectations on this, right? Like, people have money tied up waiting for this Model 3. I think they deserve to have a realistic sense of when they're really going to actually get a car. And I understand that, setting difficult to achieve goals is very motivating for people. And this is this is one of the tactics that Elon Musk uses at all of his companies to try and achieve amazing things. And that's great. I just don't know that that's a smart thing to do when consumers are waiting for these vehicles. And also, not consumers of high-end luxury cars. These are people who are who want, a regular car that can replace their Honda Civic or their Honda Accord or what have you, which is a very different market than Tesla's been in the past. And I think that they're playing with fire by not managing expectations reasonably. So yeah, let's see. Well, I think that might be basically it for questions. I'm always available on Twitter. You can follow me at Niedermeyer. My DMs are open, so if you do have other questions, that's a very good way to get a hold of me, and I try to answer what I can reasonably. If you have any questions right now, get them in real fast here, because I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. Again, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to listen to this very long thing. I actually do have to go to, because I have a podcast to record about autonomous vehicles. So, thank you for watching. Thank you for reading the pieces, and thank you for just caring about. I hate to sound so hokey, but thanks for caring about the truth. Like the truth matters, and I don't mean that in the sense that this is our story reflects exactly what's going on. Like every story I write about Tesla, people try and make it out like I'm trying to prove something that I'm not trying to prove. My NDA story, I was not trying to prove the suspension defect exists. Only NHTSA can prove that. In this case, I was not trying to prove that that the limit, the VOC limit in the permit is exactly what Tesla is going to do. I assume they're going to be somewhat under, their actual VOC emissions will be under that limit. Otherwise, they have problems with compliance. So the estimates that we have in there, I'm not trying to say this is exactly what Tesla is going to do. And if you actually read the piece, it's pretty clear what we're trying to prove, and that we have, we're just trying to give some factual basis around these sort of very broad claims. Which again, if you do, I actually encourage everyone, Google Tesla paint shop and look around at all of the different conflicting reports. You will find a lot of different opinions and reports about what the status of this really is, and that's why this story is important. That's why people need to look at what we're contributing. Even if you don't like the conclusions that we come to, look at the research that we did, find the value in it, because it's there. Again, we're not saying this is exactly what Tesla is doing. We're giving a sense of the real constraints that are in place, and we're using those to extrapolate a rough sense of what Tesla can really do. And again, I welcome criticism. I welcome feedback of all kinds. Again, Twitter, you can DM me, you can at me. I'm happy to pass along my email, but DM me first, and I'll get you my email. Look for more stories. We're going to keep covering this. I think the story is not done, and we look forward to continue to explain this. And I actually really hope that Tesla will take this opportunity to come out and be proactive in their communication about this, because they've made it clear that at least in some cases they really don't like uncertainty and misreporting, but in some cases they seem to tolerate it a bit too much. And I think this is one of those cases, and I think it'd be really great if they could clarify that and make it clear what is really going on here. So with that, thank you for taking the time to watch this. Thank you for reading the piece. Again, if you have questions, comments, feedback, I'm happy to respond. You know where to find me. So thanks everyone, and have a great day.